welcome back to the Runaways YouTube channel. And today we have a special treat. This is our first look at Bright Light's classic constructed tier list. Unfortunately, we couldn't delete images, so Briar's still on here in the unplayable tier. Together with me, Yuanji Li, I have Lucas Oswald and Esghy. I received some feedback. Maybe it might or might not have been from people that are in this call right now about how maybe the tier list rankings are not representative of what people are experiencing when they play their own games of Flesh and Blood. Maybe a little bit too negative. And so I have taken the liberty of renaming all the tiers to kind of like the level of event that you can bring a hero to. And what's actually funny? I'm gonna switch worlds with calling, because worlds is like a mixed format and calling is like more rounds. It's kind of, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but
counterintuitive, but I kind of agree. Yeah, like because
calling is the hardest if it's the best.
You're playing only constructed the whole time. That makes sense. Yeah, that's logical.
So it kind of like scales based off of like how many total wins that you can really reasonably expect to get. Kitchen table, like it doesn't matter if you're capable of winning like any games, you can play it with your friends as long as it's fun. Armory tier, I think reasonable to just like pick up like 2 or 3 wins over the course of like a 3-round event. Pro quests are usually like maybe like 5 or 6 round events, and you need to pick up like 5 wins. For worlds or like pro tour level events, it's usually like I think about 8 rounds of CC, so you want to win like 6 to 7 of them. And calling is like 12 to 14 rounds, and you have to win like 12 of them. It's like,
so the goal is to make top 8 with these decks. Like that's you have to win that.
Yeah. That'll be like our barometer. Lucas didn't want to go over the new heroes first, so let's just go over the old heroes. Do you guys want to start with Lexi? We'll just like put Lexi on.
Yeah, I mean, I think
tier.
we can all agree that she belongs at the highest. She's didn't get hit in the last ban restricted announcement, so she's probably the boogeyman.
Mm-hmm. She also cannot be in Worlds tier because most likely it's unplayable for Worlds.
She will be in the unplayable tier for Worlds when we make our next tier list video.
Yep.
Yeah, no, but Lexi still just the strongest deck, does a bunch of damage, combined with Disruption, has the most powerful cards.
Yeah, I think Lexi just has the full package, which a lot of the heroes that we talk about, I think they're either going to be missing like some aspect of things, which will either not matter or be detrimental. Azalea as the other ranger, or there's 2 other rangers, Azalea and Riptide.
I think you can put Azalea in the ProQuest tier, in my opinion.
ProQuest tier?
Yeah, I think
Lucas will agree with that, but she also has very disruptive attacks, but she has inconsistency issues that plague the deck. Sometimes you lose to yourself when you're playing this deck. I
think Azalea is a pretty strong deck with a pretty strong matchup spread. I think she also is a deck that you need to put a lot of reps into to be strong. You have matchups like Dromai and Icelander, and then especially some of the harder matchups like Bravo, that require really precise play to navigate them. And doing well at like you said, Worlds for like 8-9 rounds and expecting 6-7 wins can be pretty difficult with the deck into a blind field. Mm-hmm. But I do think that Azalea is a pretty strong deck. She's one of the few decks that has a pretty reasonable Lexi matchup. And then, I think she also just has this ability to lock out any aggro or semi-aggressive deck. So if we're looking at a format with potentially more heroes that are just boosting a lot, at least in my testing historically, Azalea has been very strong into dash, and so I could see her being good into the new decks. Frailty tokens are really good, and obviously Red in the Ledger's a house, so I think it's a good spot to put Azalea.
I think what's separating Azalea from being tiered higher is that Azalea is also kind of like has some of like rune building problems where you need to draw like the right mix of cards. Pat has a lot of experience playing fatigue decks that are like hyper consistent. Usually, I think in longer events, you know, you benefit a lot from not only like the deck being consistent, but you know, play off of like your opponent's like mental fatigue, right? It's not just like they have to always make the right plays, and you have like a default that you can go to, and decks like Azalea just like don't really have like a default. That's the only reason
why I'm good, right? It's because you have the ability to play these decks that are just easy to play.
See, that's the secret. Okay. Riptide. Where does Riptide? I think suffers a lot from like when Lexi rotates out, right?
I think for the beginning of Bright Light's format, I would put Riptide in the Armory tier. I think he's pretty good into Lexi, and then also he's pretty strong into mech historically. Dash was actually one of his best matchups. The threat of being able to fatigue them, as well as having a really good plan if they try to be aggressive or attack with their pistol, is really strong. One thing that a lot of people don't initially realize is every single one of Riptide's traps triggers if your opponent activates Plasma Purifier, attacks with Tekla Plasma Pistol, and activates Induction Chamber. So if your opponent's at 15 life, and you have 15 traps in your deck, and they have the pistol set up, they're just dead. So that matchup is strong. He might be weaker into newer Mechanologists, but Frailty tokens are still really good against mech. He produces a lot of those. Most of his traps are pretty strong as well. And so I think he could be in a reasonable spot. That being said, obviously matchups like Dromai, Bravo can be pretty challenging, as well as also just being kind of a weak deck. Like, you don't have a super solid win condition a lot of the time. You're kind of just hoping that, your damage is good enough and that you draw the right sequence of hands. He's kind of like Azalea, but in addition to non-attacks and arrows, you also have traps. So your deck's just a little less consistent.
I think like depending on like how your local scene is, maybe like Riptide is actually like pretty solid, right? Like if you just have a bunch of people who like playing, characters that play attack reactions go again attacks.
Yeah, if your meta is like Lexi, Mech, and Dorinthia, Riptide's actually a pretty reasonable choice.
Yeah. The one thing that neither of you mentioned was the addition of Intoxicating Shot. I do think.
True.
Yep. Him up at a higher level. Like, this card is a 0-for-4 blue that you're not going to play this card first cycle, but this card, like, when it comes back, is just like the strongest rate blue that we've ever seen for something. And granted, it does have a negative hit effect, but that negative can be turned into a positive against the decks where your traps now can turn on against things that they shouldn't normally be turning on against. So that this card is effectively sometimes 0-for-5 points of value.
Wait, Lucas, you played more of Tide, I think, than either Pat or I, but like, how much does it matter that you're also adding like an extra blue into your deck? Like,
it's actually pretty nice. The only thing that makes it like that can be awkward sometimes is Ravenous Rabble is a card that you like to play. Adding more whiffs in that can be annoying, but having another card that you want to pitch in C-second cycle is really big for Riptide. Historically, you wanted to operate off of a yellow, but you were fine with a blue. But since you're often a fatiguey deck that doesn't have a weapon, the cards that you're pitching kind of have, they kind of just have to have big numbers on them so that you can actually fatigue your opponent out.
Yeah.
So having a blue card that you can pitch that attacks for some real damage is nice. I also think that Intoxicating Shot potentially has the ability to be a win condition.
Like you give them and you just like hit them with like 3 traps or something.
Yeah, I haven't played it like at all, but I think that there might be some high-level strategy similar to what Azuri used to do against decks like Oldham, where it might be a little tedious, but providing a win condition into decks like Bravo can be really big, where, for example, you set up a turn where you play 2 to 3 buffs into an Intoxicating Shot, and then next turn you draw into a lot of traps. It can be pretty hard for your opponent to actually deal with that, because either you're taking a lot of cards from their deck or you're dealing a lot of damage to them with the hit effect as well as the traps. So I think Intoxicating Shot is a really big addition for Riptide and leads to some interesting new strategies.
You just go down the line. Dromai has been like pretty well performing prior to Bright Lights. In Bright Lights, gets access to two new cards. One is the Tome that I think a lot of people have tried to experiment with, that lets you play Royal and then you get to like generate extra Ash, and then also potentially play like higher resource cost dragons and attacks. And also Dromai gets a new aura that I don't think that she's really going to be playing, because you have to play like a weapon that, I don't know, maybe the Iris Dromais, get another card.
She also got the Chromai Ash.
Oh yeah, true. I just glossed that over. I think all of these cards have kind of like niche uses. Tome is probably like the most widely applicable one, right? Where do you guys think she falls now?
I think she's in calling tier. One thing that we saw towards the start of last format, Dusk Till Dawn format, especially in the Battle Hardened circuit, was we saw a lot of Dromai decks kind of stepping away from the more traditional Redline builds and the more traditional Big Dragon builds and kind of forming like a mixture. And then towards the end, I think we saw mostly people just playing just Big Dragon Dromai. But I think with the new Tome, there's like a real mix where you can get the best of both worlds potentially, and you can start playing some of these really efficient redline attacks and really efficient redline lines without sacrificing some of these bigger dragons like Necria, Tumultai being a huge one, obviously, and things like that. As well as just being able to have this kind of new style of Dromai that gets to play Royal and Snapdragon Scalers, similar to what we saw some people playing back in ProQuest Season 3, but now with more tools. So I think Dromai is really strong. I thought she was already really strong. She got new tools. She's historically good into Mechanologist, so I see no reason not to put her in the calling tier.
Yeah, I was going to say between worlds and calling tier. I've played a little bit of this hero myself since Bright Lights. I do think that the Big Dragon Dromai is kind of where like the focus of everybody has been prior to this. So I'll be interested to see how the Tome plays into like building that kind of more traditional redline build. Like I think in those like considering a deck like Mara Ferris's deck from second place at PT Baltimore, like a deck similar to that, can really use that card and get access to like, you can actually play some of these expensive dragons now. So like, I don't think you can overload on them, obviously, because you only have 3 copies of this card and you have no control over when you'll draw them. But like, just having access to, say, Necria and the Mirror is huge, right? Like, because that deck, like, that was one of the reasons, like, Big Dragon, like, tended to win against Redline and the Mirror, was because you had access to these better dragons that thicker dragons.
You also got like better, you got to make more Ash if you play a Tome.
The other thing about Dromai that would potentially knock her down is she obviously has a pretty high skill cap, or skill floor, really. We see time and time again people like joking about, Dromai didn't convert again. But I think she will kind of this problem will lessen as time goes on, because people will play her more strong players will become acquainted with the deck. The players who do play her will get more reps. And I do think we're starting to get towards the time where we're going to start seeing Dromai be like a real force to be reckoned with. Because she's always been an incredibly powerful hero, and now she has even more tools, even more ways to be built, and people are getting better at her. So,
not to say that things who are playing them were not good at solid, just they probably didn't have like all the reps that they needed to.
It's okay. Dromai has a lot of 60-60 matchups.
90-90
historically,
I hate this.
Yeah, 90-90.
Yeah, like the Bravo matchup and that the classic 95-95.
Yeah. Next illusionist is Prism. Lucas has actually been playing Prism like a bit recently.
Yeah.
I kind of want to put her between Armory and Kitchen Table.
Yeah, I think she probably belongs in Kitchen Table. But I only think that is because, in addition to being a relatively weak hero, she has some bad matchups right now. I think she does very powerful things. Her hero power combined with Empyrean Rapture is really strong The Angels are very good. Heralds are really good. And then you have the potential to have a transformative sideboard plan, or even just a main board plan where you're playing Iris of Reality and some very powerful auras.
Yeah.
Where I think you can have strong matchups into a lot of different decks, but fitting it all into the same 80 is really hard. And I mean, unfortunately, the plan into the aggressive matchups feels really good until you realize that your weapon costs 2 resources and you just have to draw the perfect hand, basically, to be able to stay on the front foot. If you don't draw exactly, 2 blues and 2 heralds, you're blocking with 2 cards, and in any race scenario, that can be quite awkward. I think she has a lot more play than people think. I think that there are a lot of matchups that people kind of discounted as poor that are not very poor, but she does still have some, issues with fitting everything in the same deck. Her Dromai matchup is literally unwinnable. And she has some consistency issues to where I don't think I'd feel great putting her in Armory tier. But I think she could be like bottom of Armory, but I think this is roughly the area she belongs in.
The 32 HP is the one that I always come back to when I look at this hero. That's just like, that's the kick for me.
It's so funny. It's so funny because I think she absolutely deserves it. like if she had 40, she'd be broken.
Well, maybe that's true.
That's a good segue because we can talk about a 30 health hero instead of a 32 health hero. Yeah, I think Kano fluctuates. I think Kano fluctuates between being like Armory level to like Worlds level, depending on the meta.
Depending on how long people have forgotten about Kano.
Yeah. Kano has this weird spot where he does much better at big tournaments historically than at like small tournaments. Because at big tournaments, people are really hyper fixated on making sure that every slot in their deck has a purpose. And typically it is not worth using slots to have a good Kano matchup because he's not a represented deck. But at like ProQuest or Armories, people will often just have 3 sideboard slots, and then they're like, do I want 3 poppers or 3 Oasis Respites? And if people are even considering putting, Oasis Respites or extra Spell Void in their deck or extra AP in a deck that doesn't usually play it, it's pretty rough for Kano. He's also just kind of a high rolly deck sometimes, and playing him at a big event can be tedious because of that.
You
Sometimes
just have to draw your cards in order.
Yeah, your deck just has to do it.
Yeah, it depends. I think Kano that's like true when there's really good aggro decks. Kano can feel kind of high rolly. Against decks that are slower, I think oftentimes Kano can have more, like kind of deterministic.
Almost deterministic,
yeah. But I think Kano is not that great into Dromai, if I remember. Is not that great into...
I mean, they have Sand Cover and Oasis most of the time.
Yeah, like there are some issues. Like it's really hard for Kano to deal with like a Thamai to like actually destroy it.
Another thing that Kano is really bad into is dash. And if people are playing Mechanologists at their local ProQuest with blue cards and Visurtronic Model I and boost cards in their deck, it's really hard to win because these decks have a lot of blues, they have AB3, and they can just present as much damage as you give them. If they want to keep an extra blue in hand to play around Wildfire combo, they can do it easily. They're like, okay, this is directly 4 less damage because I don't get to Chamber Pistol you, but that's fine because I get to play the rest of my hand the same.
I think because of what you said, I'm actually gonna move Kano up into the Worlds tier from ProQuest, just because like I think at ProQuest and Armory level events, it's probably more likely that there's gonna be like more Mechanologist players now.
I think it's strange to move him up because of this, but I do think he is much better at a Worlds style event than he would be at like Armory or ProQuest level.
Yeah.
But I think
the sentiment is that Kano didn't get better matchups from the set, but
I think we're overthinking it. I think you should put him in Armory tier.
Okay. That's good.
Like I think it's.
Let's just move on. Okay, Icelander.
Icelander is definitely in calling tier for me. This deck is probably the like the next big powerhouse, I think. Showed.
So some of you might know me as an Icelander main. I would put her in like ProQuest tier. So I think Icelander's in this strange position where she's just as strong as she's always been, where she has really powerful things that she does. She has good matchups sometimes, but like her matchup spread just looks terrible right now. If people are, I think Dash Inventor Extraordinaire is her worst matchup in the game, and that hero is much better and will be played a lot more. I think Mechanologist decks that are built similarly to old Boost Dash, but changed a little bit, are also probably bad matchups. I think Lexi's a bad matchup, and then I think Dromai is not necessarily a bad matchup, but is one of the weaker matchups. I think potentially them playing Tome is actually good for Icelander because it means they're playing fewer actual blues. But I think her matchup spread has gotten so much worse that I would put her in ProQuest tier. I could be convinced to put her in Worlds tier because she defies the odds. She's punishes people for making mistakes, and because I love her. But man,
I think it's hard for most. I think it's hard for like the average player to also to convert with Icelander compared to other heroes.
So the thing that I'll say about Icelander is that she has very consistent turns. Like most of her turns do very similar things. You attack for 8 and block for 6, and and then or block for 3 and play a card from Arsenal. Like that is what pushes her over the top for me, is her consistency, because you only have like 20 reds in your deck most of the time. Like your turns are very consistent, and that's the thing that I look for when I'm playing decks. And you just don't, like, with the exception of maybe Bravo, you don't have a lot of heroes like that right now that exists in the format. So Worlds tier would be the bare minimum for me, but that's my opinion.
I think the main issue that I have with her is when Dynasty came out, I felt like when I was playing like Icelander against like all the people who were trying to play Dash, that like Hypothermia was like my only out.
Yeah, the Dash matchup is really bad. It is actually, like, if you played Icelander into Lexi, Dash it feels similar, but it's worse. It's very difficult. And they get more tools now to make them even better because they get more cheap loose cards, which means that they can do the annoying thing more, which is just keep a hand and attack you for 3 and then make you do something. Oh, you give them a Frostbite? Cool. That means they just activate Foundry Heart this turn instead of not. Or you give them Channel Lake Frigid? Cool. I'll just load the pistol and not shoot it because it doesn't matter. And I don't know. I don't think she's well positioned, but
I'm not disagreeing with the Mechanologist matchup being bad. I just think that her total spread over the hero base is very good still. But
I think you also, I think you have to factor in that Icelander is like, I think she does have pretty simple play patterns, but she has a lot of traps where if you arsenal the wrong card, that can be game losing. And then I think that's like where a lot of the difficulty is for many players. Okay, moving on to the only Guardian in CC right now, Bravo Showstopper.
I'll let Pat take this one.
I think Bravo is still quite good. Not as good as Oldham ever was, but my initial thought is to put him at the top of ProQuest or the bottom of Worlds. That's where I would initially want to put it.
I like him at Worlds here.
I think he's just so consistent at what he does. He does have some weaknesses, certainly like things that he can't deal with, but he blocks well, he attacks well when you let him attack, and he has a ton of armor.
Yeah, I think Bravo's only major weakness is, compared to, I guess, like Oldham, is that, there's like a finite amount of breakpoints that you can block, and that most of your like turns are constrained by like the fact that your most powerful turns are going to involve, like 3 or 4 cards, right? It's going to be like a dominated like something, or and that can be like a little bit hard to put together. But I think if you're like taking a more defensive, consistent approach, his weapon is pretty strong.
Yeah. The other big weakness that he has is that he has so many kind of just medium blue cards that are in the deck because they're blue block 3s, like Sable and Debilitate Blue, that you really just never want to put in your arsenal, but you're sometimes priced into putting some of those cards in your arsenal or taking, not getting full value out of your hand. And that is one of the things that Oldham had over Bravo.
Yeah.
Because Crown Seats is, chef's kiss of card. You gotta balance that with his, ability to take those big hands and actually convert them into on-hit effects that matter, to like Crippling Crush and Spinal Crush. So.
Yeah, one thing that Bravo did get, not in Bright Lights, I think in Bright Lights they printed that Tectonic something Rift whatever card.
Yeah.
That card is I don't know how good it is. It's probably like good in his like highest like percentage of range of hands where like, you get to go first and you get to just like play that, but it seems not that great. Bravo did get a new pair of Guardian boots in PCC around the table.
Yeah. The card is on the spectrum of where people say it's unplayable or very good. I think that a good player can get good value out of those boots. So.
Yeah, it's like the first time that it's like the highest like defensive value on like a boots that they've printed.
Well, scab skins, but yeah.
Well, yeah, same level.
Yeah. Bravo also has the strength. I think we kind of like mentioned this, but like he's similar to Icelander. He poses a lot of questions for your opponent, and so even if at the highest level he might not have the best matchup into Lexi or Icelander or Dromai, if you're just playing into players at your ProQuest or at Worlds, even that might not be as experienced in their Bravo matchup, you can win a lot of games that maybe you're not supposed to, or maybe you, as the Bravo player, have more opportunity to just play your cards as you see them and have to think less about, how you're going to beat fatigue or how you're going to play around them just having a dominated attack. And posing questions, I think, is something that time and time again we underestimate. And then time and time again, Icelander wins Worlds, or Charles wins Nationals with Reaping Blade, with a deck that we might not think wins every time against these strategies, but posing questions at high-level events, even against the best players, still wins tournaments.
Yeah. Katsu gets Red Bittering Thorns, as well as like some support for Crouching Tigers in around the table.
Well, the defense reaction that creates a Zen State token.
Oh yes, if you already played a Wax Off.
Oh yes, of course.
I don't think that card is going to make like huge waves, right? I think that's more of a for fun card.
I think that card has real potential in specific metas. I mean, the rate is really powerful, but I think it has to be a meta where you want to play like a defensive Katsu deck into decks that have 0-cost cards, and where you're okay with Wax Off being a 0 for 3. I don't know.
But also has to be like 0-cost cards that like attack for 5, right?
Yeah. You have to get value out of the Zen State as well, and out of Wax Off. So I think if this Sarai is playing nothing but 0-cost cards, and he's one of the stronger decks, maybe Wax Off shines there, but generally
it's still a 0-cost blue that pitches to Kanachi, and
one spot that it might actually be good into Mechanologist, I think. Especially if dashes starting Pounder. I think that there's situations where they play something like a T-Bone or a red 0-60, or even a yellow 0-60, or any number of the new 0-cost cards. You can play a Wax Off, and then they have their high octane turn where they attack you a million times with the pistol, or even they just attack you with 4 attacks, and your Zen State gets a whole lot of value in that situation.
You gotta remember that you get 2 turns out of it as well.
Yeah, I think Katsu has some pretty good matchups. I'm hesitant to put him at calling tier just because I feel like he is still potentially a little bit inconsistent.
I was gonna say ProQuest tier. That was what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
But
I think he is probably the strongest aggro deck post Lexi rotate.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that matters because he does have, like you said, really big consistency problems. And he's also never been on top like something like Lexi has, or even to a degree Dromai or Ice Hunter or Bravo has. So I think people will find new ways to play around Katsu. Like I think that there are some strategies that people can employ to make the matchup better with a lot of decks into Katsu. And you know, the deck really hasn't had its time to shine, and once a deck gets its time to shine, it's really time to, you know, see if it has what it takes to win or do well at big tournaments. Like we saw Bravo doing really well early last format, and then people started having game plans, and he kind of fell off. And Katsu could potentially do the same thing. So I could get behind Pat's ProQuest tier.
Phi, Rising Resentment.
we need Dan.
We need Dan. Yeah,
Resentment.
Yeah, I have Phi in the kitchen table tier. Honestly, for me,
I think
he's obviously not, but
I don't think he's that bad. But
I think Phi is in the situation where there's not a super compelling reason for me personally to want to play Phi. Because I don't think he's the strongest aggro deck, and especially with new mech tools, I don't think he's the strongest deck at saying no blocks and just throwing damage. But I don't think that means that he's F tier or whatever. I think he's very capable of winning ProQuests. He has the best Dromai matchup in the game. He has a pretty solid matchup into Bravo. And then he also just is a deck that deals a lot of damage, and decks that deal a lot of damage and don't have to think a whole lot are going to be able to win ProQuests and easily top 8 ProQuests, I think. So I would put him in ProQuest here just because I don't think he has.
I'm not convinced. I think that Phi has some like fundamental problems that aren't really addressed. And I think that he's always had these problems, especially after Belittle gets banned. Like the deck itself just wants to run a lot of reds, but then also is somewhat of a resource intensive deck. Your best cards are going to be like playing Art of War. Like Art of War is your best card probably. And it's just like if you look at like how decks are constructed, like Chain was also like a big Art of War deck, and I think Chain plays like 24 to like 26 blues or whatever. And Phi kind of got around this by playing Belittle. And I think now, like with Belittle getting banned, it's basically as soon as Belittle got banned, Phi kind of fell off a cliff.
This is true. Like you do have like the added benefit of like mass momentum that does like we talked about earlier, present a lot of questions to your opponent, but that still has game into these other decks. But I do agree that like it's not something that I would want to register at a tournament because, well, one, I don't like my cards blocking for 2, but in general, in general, I just think that you get put into these kind of first hands that will eventually appear at some point throughout the course of the point in the game that will kind of maybe get back some of the tempo you might have even gained for attacking as hard as you could.
I don't think that he's kitchen table tier, but I just don't think that he's like at all good right now. I think that there's some fundamental issues. I think Phi is missing either like a power card, or he's missing like a way to more consistently play like a higher resource curve.
Yeah, I think that sticking him like at either the bottom of Armory tier is probably the best for him. I definitely don't agree that he's kitchen table. He's not that bad, but it's going to be tough for him to take down a larger event, in my opinion.
I'm also here now as Ethan Van Sant's representative. We're gonna talk about Brutes. I think Levi is actually really interesting at like post Lexi. I think pre Lexi, I have her kind of at ProQuest Armory level, where the deck can do like really powerful things, but ultimately has some consistency issues. I think we saw Levi, get some top 8 finishes at like nationals level events as well. She didn't really get anything from the new set other than she has like addition by addition to other classes, right? Like Levi as a brute is pretty decent into like mechanologist, doing like any kind of like item setups.
Are you talking about she got Slay?
I think.
Oh,
Leviah,
true, Slay.
I think Leviah also is kind of one of those decks that's like waiting for Lexi to Living Legend. I think once Lexi Living Legend, she gets a lot of points. I personally think she's very strong into Bravo, Dramai, and Katsu. And when you look at all of the decks in Worlds and Calling tier that are not Lexi, wow, those are all decks that I think Leviah is strong into.
Yeah.
So I think that she is kind of waiting to pounce. But once she gets up,
I think currently probably Leviah is somewhere either at the bottom of ProQuest tier or the top of Armory tier.
Yeah.
But this is only like with Lexi in the format.
Yeah, so I'm making all of my picks based on Lexi still being around.
Yeah.
I do agree that once Lexi's gone, that she will get a big boost. Maybe even being the best aggro deck like that exists.
Yeah, Leviah might be.
With Katsu maybe being, a competitor for that slot. And just the ability to have Leviah redeemed and Leviah consumed like on standby to just kind of bail you out of whatever situation that you need really is like the reason to play the deck. It's just one of the more powerful things you can be doing in Flesh and Blood right now. Basically gaining access to either limited recursion on the redeem side, or you have just basically an extra intellect on the consume side. Once you go through some hoops, which it's not trivial. You do have to play the game to a certain point to get yourself into these positions, but you are just being very rewarded for not a lot of cost at taking up one card in your inventory. That's the reason why I was drawn to the deck initially whenever we first saw that card.
Any way to fatigue either hero faster is something that Pat is interested in. So.
Yeah.
Your full deck.
I think I'm gonna put her at the bottom of ProQuest for now. I think that we're gonna have like a lot of heroes in the Armory tier.
Oh yes.
Rhinar also is like. I heard Van Sant tell me that the new card that is out for brutes is it's like a decent role player, like especially if mechanologists are very popular.
Smashing performance.
Yeah, I think that Rhinar is for me somewhere between Armory and ProQuest level.
I think he has a similar role as Leviah. I think he's slightly better before Lexi Living Legends, because I actually think that he has a pretty reasonable Lexi matchup. I think playing into unprepared Lexis or Lexis that sideboard for an aggressive Rhinar deck, you can actually fatigue some Lexis. And then I think on the other side of the coin, since he blocks better than Leviah with his cards from hand, I actually think that it's a more consistent plan to be able to block with a few cards and attack with a few cards against Lexi. He also has access to Command and Conquer, Tunic, and Pummel, which can just steal games against Lexis. I know I personally played a ProQuest against Chandler Toe a while back where I played Lexi and he played Rhinar, and he just kept playing Command and Conquer with Pummel being represented, and I just kind of got rolled. And so I think he's slightly better before Lexi Living Legends. I think once Lexi Living Legends, he fills a similar role as Leviah, probably a little weaker then. But right now, I think he's pretty good. I also think he has a better Icelander matchup than Leviah, which right now matters quite a bit.
Yeah, Icelander specifically was the one that I was going to bring up. Like, the ability to mess with Icelander's hand really is, you can't discount that, because like she very she has to arsenal very specific cards on her turn, so any disruption to that can ruin her entire game plan. So I think that is like the only draw that I see that Reinar has over Levia, because presumably once Lexi leaves the format, that's going to be the only ice deck that exists that people are still playing, and you want to take advantage of that in best you can. But I personally haven't seen a lot of success from Reinar, so I don't know. I would want to say that it's kind of below Armory, or like not in ProQuest but at Armory. But I don't think that you can really distinguish too much between the two.
Okay, sounds good. Let's talk Assassins next. Pat is kind of been Azuri's champion in our team Discord.
I love Azuri. I played the hero a lot right after it came out. I do think that the deck obviously is going to get a downgrade after Lexi leaves the format, because Lexi is the deck that Azuri kind of preys on the most, with just like this unending stream of disruption.
Yeah.
At the moment, though, I think that this deck is Worlds level. I would want to say Worlds level, but I think I'll probably get some pushback. But
yeah, at least the results historically have not agreed.
I agree that the results don't show.
Yeah, one thing to talk about is Azuri, before we go too deep into the conversation, is that Azuri did get a new card in Bright Lights in the expansion slot, Already Dead, which is a 2-cost 6-power contracts card, which is actually pretty good for her on multiple levels, right? Like just having a contracts card that you can Azuri into is pretty big, right?
Yeah, just being able to threaten extra cards in their deck. Also being able to send against Dromai to just basically any stealth card. They just have to, like, they can't put any armor in front of it anymore, because now they're having to worry about already pushing it over to the top and losing their armor that they blocked with. Like, they can't block with their chess piece, otherwise they'll lose it. It really puts the mind games on your opponent in that aspect. And it just is another card that can get buffed up by Cut to the Chase, that you can kind of push extra damage now. It's, can go up to 9 points of value on that.
Yeah, I think Cut to the Chase just gets a lot better. Where Pat wants to put her at Worlds tier, I kind of want to push back and put her at maybe like the top of Armory.
Don't go that low. There's no way.
She's not my assassin. I have no opinions.
She's not your assassin? You want Arachne?
I have some thoughts about Arachne.
Oh man, we're gonna have
You guys figure Azuri out.
Alright, Azuri, let's put her in ProQuest tier.
Okay.
Next to Azalea.
You can't put it above Icewind, but that's not fair. That's not good. She's horrible against Icewind. That's the worst matchup by far.
Okay, let's talk about Arachne then.
Alright, so I think Arachne is maybe bottom of ProQuest tier, maybe top of Armory tier. I think this hero is really strong. I think the new Already Dead card that you guys mentioned for Azuri is pretty good in Azuri. I think it's phenomenal in Arachne. It's a 2-for-6 contract card, which was already a slot that was kind of missing a little bit. But then the other problem that Arachne often faces, especially in matchups that can go to second cycle, or in matchups that stay in first cycle, but your opponent has very specific power cards like Art of War or Rain Razors are two of the biggest ones.
Yeah.
You would play a contract card, you would see a card on top of your opponent's deck, it would be a power card, and then you would have to decide, do I want to try to banish this power card and prevent them from having it second cycle, or do I want to banish this power card and lose out on silver? One big thing that you have to do against these decks is you have to keep your silver economy going so that you can get value out of your equipment, because you're a contract deck, that's really the only thing you have going for you. But you also want to get rid of your opponent's power cards with your contract cards, because that's the other most powerful thing that the contract cards do. And so Already Dead being able to banish instants and eat your opponent's power cards and make silver at the same time is really powerful. It's also another popper for Dromai, which probably doesn't matter because that matchup's pretty close to unsalvageable. but it is a big attack, which can help in matchups like Bravo. I think it's pretty strong into a deck like Icelander that will often just be blocking and playing Frost Texas and Insidious Chills, just having bigger numbers on your cards. As silly as it sounds, just like more damage is all you need in that matchup. And then I think he's very good, I think that Arachne is a very good hero into Lexi. I think they're very good into ninjas. I think that they're favored in the Assassin Mirror, good into Azalea. Dromai's not great, Bravo's not great, Icelander's not great. But if you're not playing against these decks, I think they're a pretty reasonable hero. They're the forgotten deck that gets to play Codex of Frailty.
Yeah. Well, how good would Already Dead have been when, you know, like the Guardian of choice was what's it called? Was Oldhim, right? Like that was like a major issue for.
Well, it wouldn't be.
It would have been weaker in Arachne than it would have been in Uzuri. In Uzuri, it would have been really strong because you can flip it in, but in Arachne, it's face up, so they just wouldn't block with their Rampart.
Yeah.
Well, you can. I think it hits like anything on the chain. So like if they block,
it does, but you would have to get a go again. So like you would have to, for example, play like a Hurl or something. Hope they block with Rampart, and then hope that your Already Dead hits, which is kind of tedious. But like you said, also like they can't block with their equipments earlier on the chain, which doesn't matter as much for Arachne because you don't have a whole lot of go again. But you could move towards some more go again cards, and Already Dead can be very powerful at banishing equipments for sure. I can see that as a potential win condition.
So the one thing
also very good into mech, very good into mech.
Yes.
This hero is so good in the Mechanopolis.
Because if they're boosting, then
yeah. The only weakness before in the mech was that they could set up their pistol with all of their items and they could do it fast, and then you would die. But if there are going to be mechs that aren't playing pistol plan now, I just have no idea how they ever beat you. And even if they are playing pistol plan, like Already Dead is not a huge addition, but like that matchup is I never thought was that weak, honestly.
I have a little bit of a difference of opinion, but I'll say the one thing that Arachne does have over Uzuri is that you don't have to play the stealth cards. Granted, the stealth cards which are good in with the swapping, but like just having to play them kind of bogs down your deck and what you can play. So like Arachne just gets to play more contract cards, like you just have a more dense value, and that's kind of like the one thing that when people say why would I ever play Arachne over Uzuri, that's the one thing that I always point out.
Yeah, you also get silver more consistently because you get to fate seal
and you can kind of like
Arachne's hero power, as much as we like to joke about it, it is not textless. It is very important in some matchups.
Yeah,
it's very good into like Icelander or
among their power cards is certainly not this needs that.
Yep, or just there are a lot of actually incredibly creative things you can do with Arachne, but yeah, I think Arachne's Kano matchup is actively good, unlike Uzuri's matchup where the Kano matchup I think is unwinnable. So
that's a fair point. Yeah, that's like one of their few very differing matchups. But
yeah, it's actually kind of funny, but.
My thought process was at the bottom of Armory tier, but that's
I think top of Armory tier might be a little copium, but I think they're I think they're reasonably positioned, and I think that they're better than the heroes that are below them, with the exception of Phi. But you guys were just so mean to Phi. There you go. That works.
All right. Bolton in the new set gets. What is this? Something of Bologna? What is the helm called?
Warband, I believe.
A Warband of Bologna. So it's a new helm that basically makes I guess like Raiden builds a little bit more consistent.
Yep. I think Bolton is another hero similarly to the Brutes that I was mentioning, where he's like waiting in the wings for Lexi to LL.
Yeah, I think the Lexi matchup is just so bad for Bolton.
The Lexi matchup is terrible, and then the other heroes that we see at the top are actually pretty reasonable matchups. As well as new mechs, I think are good matchups generally for Bolton. My kind of heuristic for whether or not I think Bolton is good into a deck, before I look at anything else, is if the deck is trying to block with at least 1 to 2 cards per turn, I think Bolton is strong.
Right.
Especially if those are attack actions. And I think that a lot of the new Mechatologists are looking to block with multiple cards per turn, potentially. And so playing a Raiden strategy can be really strong there. And then I think he's just good at any sort of like slow deck. So whether that's, Rhinar, Assassin, Bravo, I think Dromai, but any of these style decks, I think he's quite good there.
Yeah, I think Bolton's spot, like, I think Bolton as a deck is approaching basically a good Flesh and Blood deck. Like, it has, the consistency, which is important. Like, you get to play like 3 copies of Luminous Ascension as your power card. You get to play like cards that tutor Luminous Ascension. You get to play like a lot of your deck like functions. A lot of the cards that they print in Dusk Till Dawn, just like, it just gives him like more charge cards that he can play that are good. But I think like the main problem that Bolton has is like he just like cannot play against Frostbites. So like Icelander and Lexi are just like huge issues. So,
I think Lexi is a bigger issue than Icelander, actually. I think, this might be the Lucas Oswald special copium, but I think that if Icelander is a major part of the meta, you can build your Bolton deck to have a good matchup.
I mean, you can, like, I think the closest thing that we saw was like what some of the people in Hong Kong did with like the Decimator Great Axe Bolton. I like if you build like regular Raiden Bolton, I just don't think you have like enough like resource cards. Like people constantly complain about how Icelander is like one of the worst matchups for Bolton. I think if you're playing like a more normal build.
I think there's some sideboard cards that you can put in that actually make it okay, but it definitely with current lists it is quite favored for Icelander.
The thing that I love about Bolton is that his versatility, like you get to really kind of make your opponent guess at the beginning of the game how you're going to build this particular match. Like, are you going to be going for combo? Are you going to be fatigue? Are you going to be this rated value deck? And they really all want you to be sideboarding very differently. So at an Armory or at a ProQuest, when you are kind of revealed, more likely to see what everybody's playing, I think it's a little bit worse. So I think at a bigger event it's actually a little bit better, to be honest, but I don't think that it's proven itself to go up to some of these higher level events, but that can't be understated in my opinion. And that, to me, I want to put him a little bit higher, and I think that the combo deck is a lot more consistent with the Warband. It really takes a lot of pressure off the way you need to start the combo turn. I had just literally be able to just swing the weapon to start the combo when you have access to the instant speed Luminous Ascension.
Yeah, it lets you build your deck in some more creative ways where you don't need to just like mindlessly include all these garbage like charge cards that do nothing, because you don't need the charge card on your combo turn. You just need a little bit of soul beforehand, which I think opens up a lot of avenues for the Bolton combo deck.
Yeah, I decided to put him at the bottom of ProQuest here just because I think historically Bolton has like done okay at ProQuest. I think he has picked up wins at like that level of tournaments before, and I think like Lucas said, like I don't think that any of the new mechanologists really counter Bolton.
I think they might be actively bad, but maybe not Max.
Yeah, we'll find out. Dorinthia, I think Pat had a lot of experiments with Dorinthia early on.
Yeah, I put a lot of time into Dorinthia as well. The fatigue, the switch deck that we call, trying to like kind of have the best of both worlds. I think that it really is. Decimator Great Axe, you can't really refute how powerful the card is, and fatigue strategy.
It's just so good.
It really just like takes your opponent's ability to block and just murders
I think it's the best card in Dusk Till Dawn.
Yes, I agree. It is. Well, Levi redeemed, but
sure, pretty close.
Probably the second best, but I think after Lexi leaves, that deck gets a lot better. Because you one of the problems was that you had to like make sure you had a regular Dawnblade plan to beat Lexi, because you didn't have the breakpoints to beat Lexi playing Fatigue. So I don't know. As of right now, I think it's probably at like the top of Armory level, maybe bottom of ProQuest level, but I think the deck is much stronger than a lot of people give it credit for.
Yeah, I think Dorinthia is also like another deck that's like a little bit weak to the current like meta decks, like the Lexi in particular.
It can be pretty good against Dromai, I would say. Like if you know how to play the matchup and accumulate counters
It's another 90-90.
90-90 matchup, right? Yeah.
I think that one's the funniest 90-90 to me, because I actually think it is 90-90 for like which player has more experience.
Yeah.
Like I literally think it's like Dromai has more experience. Okay, 90% for Dromai. Oh, Dorinthia has more experience. 90% for Dorinthia.
Yeah.
I have no idea who wins.
Skill-based games, skill-based matches that exist in the Flesh and Blood.
I have no idea what happens if both players have played the matchup 50 times.
Yeah, because it's very interesting, and one of my locals players plays Dromai religiously, and I've played a little bit of Dromai there, and like the games are razor thin, like razor thin margins on every street, basically. Like you're like, oh, I drew a sigil, I lost because I drew a sigil and I can't reset the counters this turn. Like those are the type of things that happen of those games.
Okay, Rune Blades have certainly taken a huge hit since Bright Lights, mostly through subtraction of Rosetta Thorn. Doesn't really affect Vincent as much, but you know, I kind of feel bad. I went to one of the Battle Hardens, and I think somebody who watches the channel asked me what I thought of Vincent in CC, and I think I told him that I just like never really thought Vincent was like that competitive in CC. And I don't know, I kind of want to put Vincent in the kitchen table tier. She's like, she does a lot of really powerful things, and she has access to, you know, like some of the best equipment suite in the game, but her hero power is like actively detrimental to you playing the game of Flesh and Blood sometimes. And then the types of like card mixes that you have to play currently to make Vincent good are kind of rough, like needing to play like pummels. And
I think that there are some things that Vincent can do that have been underexplored, but I would agree, especially with current lists, like I think she's probably kitchen table. Kind of like you said, she has too many kinds of cards that she needs to play. You know, it's like with Riptide I talked about, it's like you need non-attack, attack, and traps. With Vincent, it's like you have non-attacks, RuneGate attacks, pummels, I guess, 2 blocks that don't really do anything, things that make rune chance, reduce the rune chance in the deck sometimes. Like it's just a jumble of cards, and you're just hoping, kind of hoping that your hands work. Yeah,
unlike dude, I don't know. I had a joke in my head, and now it's gone.
Sorry.
It's like the opposite of a deck like Fi.
Yeah.
Like Fi, all the cards do the same thing. You know,
yes, it reminds me of playing Dromai and Limited.
Yeah. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. I was gonna say Vincent's kind of like a gumbo, except like where you just like put in like a little bit of everything, but then like unlike in the real world where gumbo is delicious, Vincent is just like a little bit inconsistent to play.
Sometimes she's delicious.
Yeah, sometimes.
And then sometimes you get a bite and it's all broth.
Yeah. Vincent notably did not really get any support in Bright Lights. You got Slay to help her, you know, deal with angels, even though her hero power is basically like explicitly written to destroy angels.
Yeah. Okay. We'll let them have Slay.
Yeah. Viserai. I kind of want to put Viserai in kitchen table as well.
This is your bread and butter.
Yeah, I've become known as a Viserai hater.
Yeah. Well, now that Rosetta Thorn is gone, I guess how much worse is the deck get without Rosetta Thorn?
Yeah, so I think as somebody who played a lot of Viserai before Rosetta Thorn came out, there's like a lot of issues that Viserai has with his card pool and how it interacts with his weapon. So I think before you could play either Reaping Blade or Nebula Blade, and that's kind of what you have access to now. And so like the main issues is like if you want to play like a lower resource curve to like make use of Nebula Blade, so many of Viscerai's one cost attacks just like don't really do enough. And Viscerai didn't really get that good until Everfest got printed, and then they printed Shrill of Skullform, which is like kind of like slam dunk card to be playing paired with Modern Skies, and also they printed Revel and Runeblood, which is also like a really good card to be playing with Modern Skies. And I think now that Rosetta Thorn is gone, Modern Skies just goes back to being kind of like mediocre as a card.
Yeah, I think like the litmus test for how good Viscerai is you would just take the list that people were playing before and you just throw Reaping Blade in instead. And I think you'll notice that it is like so much more than 1 point worse. Like a lot of times people will block Rosetta Thorn for 2, or they would pitch a card in AB2 on Rosetta Thorn. But being able to block 3 with a card on Reaping Blade is so huge. Like a lot of the cost curve just doesn't, or like a lot of the ways that like you attack and break points, Reaping Blade just doesn't do anything into. Not being able to seal out the game with Arcane late is really frustrating. And it is just 1 less, like 3 is less than 4.
Yep.
And those like extra points that you're losing in all those matchups are just so rough. I think Viscerai is still good into like Dromai and maybe some other stuff.
I think Viscerai's only good into Dromai if you like build your deck specifically to beat Dromai. Like I think now you have to play like Arknight Ascendancy. I think not having Rosetta Thorn is actually pretty huge into Dromai.
Yeah, being able to like attack an Ashwing and shoot them still for 2, like was really big in that matchup.
You do get a little more. There's a little more flexibility. It's not all downside. You do get to kill Azulite now.
Yeah, that's true.
Which was actually a very important dragon in the matchup because it was the 0-cost dragon that they couldn't kill with their weapon. Like Chromai, Kyloria were like pretty easy to kill. But I agree, it's definitely a net negative.
Dash. Let's go over first Dash and Venture Extraordinaire, and then we'll talk about the other 3. I think Dash and Venture Extraordinaire. It's kind of funny because I was going through all of the cards in Bright Lights earlier, and I don't think that Dash honestly gets that many cards. Like the quantity of cards that I would want to put into a Dash boost / pistol deck is not that high. Like most of the, I think LSS did like somehow like a good job of making it so that a lot of the cards are all like playable by all the new mechanologists, but somehow not that great in Dash, like OG Dash. The one card that I think that she got in Bright Lights that I think is really good for her is Twin Drive.
Yeah.
And it's kind of confusing, I guess, because Twin Drive's not like a power card, but Twin Drive kind of adds a lot of consistency to her existing power cards, which were admittedly like pretty good. I had a discussion with Dave Lynn, who you know, he's like a pretty good Dash player before Bright Lights came out, and he was like telling me about all of these like turns that you could do because he submitted Dash at US Nationals, and I'm like, well, what do you do like into Lexi? And he's like, well, it's playable because you can pull off these like around 20 damage high octane turns, and you can like pressure their hat with T-bones and stuff, and it's like now you can just do that a little bit more consistently with the existence of Twin Drive.
Yep. Makes
the other thing that Dash gets outside of just like normal boosty pistol stuff is you get the Hasanabi Blaster Dash gets probably stronger because you have more hyperdriver synergies, and you have just like in general more.
Oh, dude, Big Bertha.
Yeah. You have more good 0 and 1 cost boost cards now, which make the Jalapeno Blaster deck significantly better. Which is a deck that we kind of saw explored a little bit when what was it, Dynasty first came out.
Yeah.
But I think now we really get to see Habanero like kind of come into its own in a way that it hasn't before.
I want to put Dash somewhere. She's either for me right above or right below Bravo.
I think I think she's above
world's tier, but I was gonna say below, but I could see it above as well.
Yeah, I think they're on the same like level of deck. I don't know how, like, if her Lexi matchup. I think like the biggest question is like whether or not her Lexi matchup is significantly improved. Because like I don't think that Dash's Dromai matchup gets like crazy better.
I don't think it gets better at all.
Well, the one thing that it does is that you get to now have Twin Drive Blue Pulse Wave, like that hand combination. Because Pulse Wave Harpoon is one of your best cards against Lexi. So I presume that will make the math a little bit better because it was like kind of close beforehand.
No. I think she gets a lot of good. I think her play into Lexi gets a little bit better, but I don't. What do you think into Dromai?
I don't think she gets a whole lot of tools into Dromai, but I think that there are just I need to play it, but I think that the addition of more boost poppers potentially make it stronger. Just like the bad 3 for 6 cards.
Give me an excuse to play Big Bertha.
Yeah.
Like honestly, I think that the 3 for 6 boost cards might be better than some of the other poppers you were playing before. I don't think that you want to include like a whole lot more poppers because I don't think that's why the matchup's bad.
Yeah.
Or like where the weakness was in the matchup, but I do think that it might be better to have a 3 for 6 boost card than a payload or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, obviously, if you're playing, Hassan, the Hanabi Blaster Dash, then obviously you get more good poppers, right? You get the 3 for 6 jump start. The Big Bertha might be like good in that deck.
Yeah.
So you do have a lot more popular.
Yeah, Rev Up.
poppers.
I think Rev Up, if you start Hyperdriver, is actually quite strong.
Yes.
Throttle is a really good card for Dash. Just like being able to do like 2-card 8s.
Especially in the deck that gets to have resources so easily with Hyperdriver and Boundary Art.
Yeah.
You guys also have access to Big Shot, which is another one that will come up a lot, I think, in that, especially
Which one is that, sorry?
That's the 3 for 6 that if you boost twice, it gets +2.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that one is another popper that, especially for the Hanabi Blaster version, I think would help in that matchup a little bit more.
I can see that for sure.
Now let's go on to the new heroes. What everybody's been waiting for. Dash IO. I think we're gonna be making videos probably for all of these decks with our like initial reactions and like a sample deck list for these. Dash IO I think has been like the hardest for me to figure out like where she belongs.
Yeah, I think out of everybody here right now, I've done the most work on Dash. I think she's really strong. I think she has one of the most powerful hero abilities in the game. Basically just letting you like draw an extra card every turn in theory is really good. Being able to look at the top of your deck also opens up some really interesting avenues for different cards, things like Come of Find-All potentially. And then you do have some of the most ridiculous like plays in the game. I've kind of told a lot of people this, but Boom Grenade off the top with Dash IO is the best card in the game by a mile. It's basically 1 resource, you deal 6 damage, and you get your action point back so it has go again, and you're not using a card. So if you evaluate a card at 3 points, it's like 1 for 9 with go again. It's obviously a lot more complicated than that because you have to jump through a lot of hoops, but you have some very strong rate plays, you have a really good weapon. Adaptive Plating is a really good card, and that deck gets to use that card in pretty unique ways. So you have like extra armor, which was something that Mech was lacking before. Starting at 36 is rough, and it does have consistency problems, right? The items are no blocks, but I think that Dash IO has a lot of potential. I think she's really strong. I'd probably throw her in somewhere Pro Quest here, but
I think while Lexi is legal, which is what this tier list is based off of, I think Dash IO is like close to unplayable.
I also think that is
in like matchup in like higher level tournaments. I think the main issue is that when you play like things that tax that, like I don't think Dash IO deals very well with taxes.
Not at all with current builds.
Yeah.
No, it's weird. If Lexis are playing ice cards, like if they're playing Ice Quakes or Arctics,
Yeah.
Like Winter's Bite Blue can
Well,
be
you're actually
just
pretty good against Winter's Bite, right? Especially if you have an item.
I think only if you have an item on top
I
of
was
your
gonna
deck.
say you're good exactly if you do have an item. If you don't have an item, it's terrible for you.
Yeah.
It's like very risky for her to want to play that card into you, not knowing. Like
I don't think so, because like most of the time it's at least good like 75% of the time.
This is pretty deep. This is pretty deep.
Yeah.
But she's not great against disruption.
Yeah, and then I think like the other issue that you get with like playing items is that like I think naturally Dash.io wants to play large hands.
Yeah.
I think that's where she kind of shines, and then playing like against decks that present a lot of hit triggers I think is also like a very big issue. So it happens that Lexi is just like both.
So we'll put her in the.
I think she's an Armory tier for now, but
waiting room.
yeah, I think she's also in the Lexi waiting room. Meklovassen.
Reklovessen is his name.
Yeah, Reklovessen. Dude.
Yeah, Reklovessen.
I tried really hard for this hero. I wanted to say that this hero was gonna be amazing, but in practice, Teklo Leveler is just not a good weapon. It's really hard to get value out of this card. And
have you played into Lexi's?
I have played some Lexi games, but like it's just as bad. Like you gain like access to armor and stuff like that, but like not if you're going to play, you can't play it as like a fatigue style deck because your weapon's bad, and you can't play it as like a boosty deck. Like you can play it as like a boosty deck, but then you're not like getting full value out of his cards. I don't know, like it seems like you're either this, you're kind of like Cody in one of our meetings said something like this. It's like you're either this bad fatigue deck or you're a bad aggro deck. Like you can't kind of put it all together because you're playing these evos and like they get in the way of one thing, and if you're trying to play fatigue, your weapon doesn't generate enough value for you to win a long game. So I don't know. I personally think that right now he's kitchen table. I wanted to say maybe that he could be better, but at least until somebody proves me wrong, I don't know. Hopefully I'm proven wrong. I'd love to come back to this a year from now and be completely wrong, but because I wanted to love this hero.
Yeah, he has like I think some of the coolest looking cards and like very like cool, I think, aesthetic in terms of mechanics and design, like art design.
A lot of people were really drawn to this hero.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He combines like wizard and chain, and you draw cards, and you play extra cards from your banish, and you block a lot. You have all these cool equipments, but I still think it's a little too early to tell for any of these new heroes really how good they are. But I think Teklovessen has shown easily the least amount of promise.
Yeah, if only they made a scrap card that was like leave no witnesses. It's just like leave no witnesses, but it's scraps.
Imagine if they made a scrap card that was good.
Yeah. When I was looking through the initial spoiler, I was like, oh, Scrap Trader, this card's like going to be really good in this deck. And I was like, man, this card is so much worse in practice than it is in theory. Like,
it's great when you do the perfect thing and you draw a good card off of Teklovessen.
Yeah, but like that's the other thing too, is that you like a lot of your blues, like you don't want Arsenal, and your deck has like at least 30 some blues in it, and it's like, I don't know, you get to these spots where you.
Teklovessen should have been an Earth hero.
Yes.
Oh, they've had Crown of Seeds.
Dude, like this would be the ultimate Crown of Seeds deck. Your hero draws you random terrible blue, you Arsenal it, and then you use your resources to play evos.
But they have to have a line of text that makes it a base, and then people will be like, you can't complain because I overwrote my Crown of Seeds. So yeah,
you did it. You're a genius.
Yeah, I think I could see a world where Teklovessen with the right card pool is really good because his hero power does seem very good, but I think the card pool is all lacking. Alright, last hero, Max Nitro. I think Max has like the highest promise out of all of the newer heroes. Having like hyperdriver synergies makes it so that, you know, he has synergy with what's it called, Nitro Mechanoid, which is a card that is very powerful, but like up until now had like basically no shell that like really was compelling to play it in. I'm pretty sure a lot of people experimented with it initially, but found that like Nitro Mechanoid is like a little bit inconsistent. I think in Dash, like the only way that you can like really get it off is if you play like Blessing of Ingenuity and then you like try to like get them back later or something. But like Max just like makes hyperdrivers with his hero power, and so I mean like theoretically like you can, without like any steam counter or shenanigans, you can make 2 hyperdrivers with from his hero power on the field at a time. I think Max will probably I don't know if he's gonna be good into Lexi or Dromai, but at least has like some kind of combo potential. So I think he's like, for me, like similar to Bolton in that regards.
Yeah, I was gonna say either the middle of ProQuest tier or maybe the bottom of ProQuest tier, the latest. That's where I wanted to put him.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't think everything. Well, definitely not everything has been like fully explored yet. Max has probably like the greatest use of the existing mechanologist cards, just because his hero power and mechanic like revolves around using boost attacks, and some of the best mechanologist cards that they printed prior to this set were all boost attacks.
Yeah, the interesting thing to me is about Banksy and whether or not we will see that weapon in the deck for the future, because like in theory Banksy is a really great weapon, because it like the on-hit effect is very threatening, and it is a card that should be drawing cards out of your opponent's hand.
Yeah.
But like in practice, like you kind of get put into these spots where like you have not a lot to do on your turns after you kind of push things forward, or you're like in this like I'm waiting to make my suit and now my weapon can't attack, so like type of thing. So like you get into these kind of weird spots. So that's the one I want to explore a little bit with this hero and see where it goes, and whether or not Banksy can stay in the deck or it has to be removed.
Yeah, I kind of wish for both Max and for Dash.io that all of the boost attacks that like when they hit, you have to put an item into play. I wish they let you put items from your arsenal into play instead of items from your hand.
I really haven't played a whole lot of Max. I agree with you. I think Banksy is the most interesting card, or I mean, not one of the more interesting cards. It's a really powerful weapon, but one of the strengths that we've seen mechanologists have in the past is playing these, a couple card hands with like a zipper hit or a throttle plus a blue, where you can attack with an attack, and then in the past it was Tectoplasma Pistol once or potentially twice with Induction Chamber. And Max's hero power can do a similar job, but it's just not quite the same. It feels having to always pay 2 resources to even be able to attack with your weapon is
effectively a 3/3, because if you're assuming that you're not actually playing a boost or a crank card, you're gonna have to spend 2 mana, 2 resources to activate his ability. So 3/3 makes it a lot more.
Yeah, it's like 3/3, and then you put a hyperdriver with 1 counter in play to your next turn, which can give you additional value.
Which refunds you 1 of the mana on the following turn.
Yeah. So it's like Titan's Fist.
2/3.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean 2/3 with a hit trigger is pretty nice.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, I want to see some builds that can better utilize Banksy. Whether that means having more crank cards in your deck, or maybe you're just abandoning the suit, or I don't know. But I want to see a build that properly utilizes this card, because I don't think I've seen it yet. So
yeah.
All right, well, this is pretty much it for our tier list. Please direct all hate mail to Lucas on X, and hopefully you guys found this entertaining. We're gonna do a follow-up tier list video probably after the next ban and suspend announcement, and stay tuned to the channel for more you know, deck techs and stuff coming out in the future, we're probably gonna do like a deeper dive into some of the newer heroes once, you know, we get some more experience playing them.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, see you guys. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for watching this video. Hopefully these tips will help you in your next events. Subscribe and stay tuned for more content to help you level up your Flesh and Blood game. Stay healthy, keep gaming.